Welcome to Andy and Ari On3. Happy Friday. And of course, it's a very happy day anytime we let you guys control the show. It is a Dear Andy, Dear Ari day. And you guys, as always, have some incredible questions that got me thinking. One got me diving into the stats. One got me going through my book collection. This is some good stuff, Ari.
Yeah, the questions I feel like are getting better every week too. Like, it's amazing, and our shows are better as a result of it. So I know we say it all the time. I'd like to say it again. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for participating, and my hope is that in doing so, you feel a part of this community because it's growing, and we are super excited to continue the growth. So thanks for being here.
I would argue we have the best college football community. Like we have the smartest chat. The smartest listeners, the best looking, most successful. Sure. I mean, it's amazing. So thank you for all that you do. Please tell friends, if they're college football fans that you have in your life and you think they're, listening to Substandard Podcast, tell them where to find us. Tell them to subscribe to the On3 YouTube page, to subscribe to Andy and Ari On3 on all your various podcast platforms, and let them know. And tell them they can ask these questions and become marginally internet famous for like 4 minutes as well.
Yeah. And as you continue to ask questions and we continue to answer them and the show gets bigger, you get more and more famous for asking the questions. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the thing that I do enjoy is, we have created an audience that doesn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time too, knows its stuff. And I think that's kind of how we are, and I feel like that's what we're proud of. So
can I submit a mailbag question right now that I just thought of?
Sure.
If we took our top 16, well, I guess 13 is the number we'd use. If we took our top 13 commenters in the chat, so we're talking about like Willie, Steven San Antonio, Nathan, like the people that are always bringing it every single day. Ferris, like, could we make them the college football playoff selection committee?
I think they'd
make a great one.
I think that my number one gripe about the college football committee discourse is that people feel like you need to be some sort of superhuman smart person to do it. And we've been banging our heads against the table that being smart is great, but the data kind of just does it's like an auto driving car. Like maybe you want to be in it, but like you don't have to drive it.
I'm dumb, but I'm pretty sure I come up with most of the same 16 everybody else would.
Likewise. And they're probably smarter than us. But I do think that, like, as the show matures too, the people that we notice in the chat the most should, get invites onto the show for, a segment to ask us questions about what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what their drive is. And we should give them the attention that they deserve. So
Nathan, anyway, I will say in the chat, who lives, a big Nebraska fan, lives in Israel, has been great. Used to send videos all the time. Now I know Nathan's got a newborn, so it's a little harder to shoot those videos now. But I love that. And you had a function when you were at the Athletic, and I think we're going to try to add that for this season, where we do a voicemail segment for instant reaction shows. We'll give you a phone number to call, and then when a game ends, you want to vent, knowing it's going to be on the air, but you go ahead and vent. I think that would be spectacular
because it's raw and pure and real. That's the best part about it. So my hope is that we'll get that done, because the episode that we did on Sundays back in the day, playing those voicemails, was like the perfect way to relive the craziness of the previous day. So well, anyway, Andy, let's get into it, huh? Super excited to hear these questions and get through them.
All right. First one is actually two. I love it when we can combine these, because sometimes we get two that are the same and maybe a different flavor, and sometimes we get a little yin and yang. This is a yin and yang situation. Joe asks, how much credit does Steve Sarkisian get in college football for the work he's done at Texas? So this is probably seeking some praise of Steve Sarkisian. Now we move to Steve in San Antonio. No, this is not an arch question. You're welcome. Maybe it's just me, but I've been surprised by Sark being labeled the offensive genius / guru with all the very obvious and serious red zone goal line issues they've had. Since Sark has had the relevant, regardless of who they were playing, the offense marches up and down the field, but once they've hit the red zone of the goal line, they come to a screeching halt and issues ensue. And in parentheses, I won't mention Ohio State or Red River 2023. I don't know that Sark has got the appropriate heat for these deficiencies, and had they just been average inside the 20, Texas could have a natty right now. How does he fix these issues that they plagued UT for multiple seasons with all that high-end talent? And why has the media overlooked it when it's of the utmost importance and many in your line of work are picking them to win it all this season? You can't win it all if you can't score a TD when you have to. All right. So Steve sent me into the stats, and he is right. The Texas red zone scoring percentage is not great, Bob. So last year, Texas was great at getting in the red zone. They had 69 red zone attempts, which tied with Indiana for the best, or for second best in the country. UNLV had the most. So they're great at getting the ball up and down the field and getting inside the 20. Indiana, and this is another reason why we probably don't praise Curt Cignetti enough, Indiana got the ball into the red zone 69 times and scored 92.8% of the time. 55 of those 69 red zone trips for Indiana ended in touchdowns. That's incredible. That is 7 more red zone TDs than the second place team, which was Penn State, which played 3 more games. So Texas, meanwhile, down the list in terms of red zone scoring percentage, they were at 79%. So not ideal, not what you want. 101st in the country. Now, here's what I will say about this, though, Steve, in San Antonio. And this is my thing with Sark. And Ari, you tell me if I'm off base here. Coaches who are good and get close to national titles or get close to competing for national titles year over year over year tend to button these things up as they go on. For example, Kirby Smart got things figured out, won 2 national titles. Ryan Day just got things figured out, won a national title. Like maybe it was Joel Klatt arguing with his assistants going, hey, throw it to number 4. Whatever it was, they figured it out. Jim Harbaugh. You can insert all your Connor Stallions jokes here, but I would argue that his staff changes and some of the other changes he made had more to do with it. He figured it out, won a national title. So I think Steve is asking a question wanting us to be overly negative towards Sark. My thing is, if Sark gets the red zone stuff figured out, Texas is going to be unstoppable, Ari.
Yeah, it is interesting to think that, like, if somebody would have asked me before this question, what has stopped Texas from winning a national championship, I'm not sure my brain would have automatically jumped to they're not good enough in the red zone. But I do think that it's interesting because when you get as close as Texas has been the last few years to winning a national championship, the things that are keeping you from it, the margins become smaller, right? Like, yeah. You know, if you're 5-5, you know, the red zone's the least of your concerns. You need to figure out how to get good players. When you get good players, then you got to figure out scheme. And when you figure out scheme, you got to figure out how to max up. Like it gets harder and harder. And as you know, it's harder to go from 10-2 to national title at times than it is to go from 6-6 to 10-2, you know? And then once you get to those big time games against teams that you have to play perfect against, well, you have to play perfect to win, right? And all kidding aside, Texas was a very talented, explosive team last year, and I thought they played a very competitive and exciting football game against a team that was, frankly, more loaded than it was. And at the end of the game, I know that red zone trip is probably the thing that sticks out, but at the same time, too,
the one play call in particular is the one that sticks out.
There was one terrible play call that we've given him. I think we gave him appropriate flack for, you know, and I think it's funny to relitigate that. I think we
probably overdid the flack for that play call because it was bad, but like,
and it actually kind of funny. Like, what if the explanation for that terrible call was just the guy that they would have used in that situation was injured and we didn't know it? Like, I just think that, like, at times it's easy to become overcritical of people who have done a great job. I think that if you and I went on a high horse about Sark and their red zone percentage, it's like, okay, sorry, he doesn't run the perfect program. You know what I mean? Like, yet.
And right. Like, and that takes us to the first question. the one from Joe about
is
how much
different.
credit does he get. I think he's getting the appropriate
question before we get to the first one, Andy. This is important.
Okay.
How many coaches who are in this rare air of elite with national championship rings in the modern day right now in college football didn't have an incubation period like this? How many people just showed up and started winning national titles, and that was it? Was like Nick Saban the only exception to that?
Nick Saban was the head coach at Michigan State for 5 years and didn't win anything.
Program during the build, like Alabama won them pretty quickly here, like under his
right.
But when you think about it, Dabo Swinney took what, 5 years, 6 years, 8 years to break through, I think even.
Yeah, it was his eighth season as a full-time head coach was the first national title.
Ryan Day was in year 6, I believe. Who else?
Kirby Smart was in year 6.
Year 6.
Wait.
Like it takes a minute. So, like to me, it would almost like if Marcus Freeman would have just messed around and won the national title in year 3 or whatever it was last year, that would have been insane. Like
that would have been more insane because that's year 3 of Marcus Freeman's head coaching career. Ditto for Kirby Smart, who almost won it in year 2 of his.
Right. And Ryan Day could have won it in year 3 if they didn't miss a field goal. Like, I mean, but like these games are won in the margins. And if Steve Sarkisian scores a touchdown instead of taking an 8-yard loss on a toss play, then maybe they're the national champions now. Like winning the national championship is really, really hard. And in order to do it 9 times out of 10, maybe not so much in the 4-team era, but certainly in the 12 and 16-team era, you're going to have to win in the margins against really good teams and get some lucky breaks. You don't run a toss when Caleb Downs is on the other team. I think you learned that. That's probably his new rule for life. But that's the way it works now. So to the first part of the question, Andy, is I think he's done a tremendous job. And if you think,
well, and I think you actually answered the first part of the question with the way you answered the second part of the question. Like the fact that we're nitpicking him now tells you that he's done a great job at Texas, because when he got to Texas, the problems were so much bigger. They couldn't put people in the NFL. They couldn't win the Big 12. Like, he's fixed all that. So now we're nitpicking him on the red zone, which they get to a lot, but don't get into the end zone as often as you want. Like, I would call that significant progress.
Yeah. Also, too, if you actually think about this stat, it was the 20 years between Vince Young and Bijan Robinson where the University of Texas did not have a first-round offensive player.
It's wild.
And if you think about why that problem or the scope of that problem existed, that's not a 2-year fix, right? Considering what they were bringing in and what they were getting in terms of output. Like, Texas's program felt fundamentally broken 4 years ago. Like, we talked about it on the show.
No, that's not an understatement, Ari. That's exactly right.
And remember, like, back in the old Andy Staples show days, we got into a huge debate, and I don't know if you'll recall this, but I do, because I remember how crazy people went. But you and I had a segment, I think this was in 2020 or 2021, way back in the day, debating whether or not Oklahoma or Texas had a higher ceiling. And do you remember when I said Texas had a higher ceiling, how crazy everybody went? They went absolutely berserk. And now we're living in times where Texas is a top 3 program in America and is going to be in the national championship picture every single year. And it's like, yeah, Sark did that. So, like, if you want to know how we think he's done, like, I don't even know if you can quantify it in a more stark and honestly, now let me ask you this: 5 years later, who has a higher ceiling as a program?
You're probably right. It's probably Texas. Although, see, here's my thing on Oklahoma is, even if Oklahoma's down now, and we've talked about this, they're not going to be down forever. Like, they'll figure it out because they always do.
But fundamentally speaking, I remember the debate. The debate was, they're in the most advantageous part of the country for talent. They are one of the largest universities in the country. They've got crazy donors. They've got a rich history of caring about football. All these things, and a lot of those stuff are true for Oklahoma. But now the discussion about that on the back end, Andy, if you recall, was, well, they're not all pulling in the right direction. They don't know how to develop talent.
Right, and this is where we need to to praise Sark and also praise Chris Delcani, the athletic director at Texas, because he's the one that got everybody around the program pulling in the right direction. And the change to NIL, I think, is what supercharged Texas in terms of roster construction. They were always getting highly ranked players, but now we know they're getting players everybody wants because they're willing to pay for players everybody wants.
Right. So, the thing that is interesting to me, though, Andy, more than anything, and this isn't a Sark conversation, this is a college football conversation, is how much do the schools that are most effective in deploying NIL capital, how do you judge their coaches properly? Because it's like so easy to say, yeah, well, Sark did all those things, and I'm sure he did. Like, we're praising him. But like, yeah, Texas is just getting players that are really good at football at a high rate.
They're also developing them, putting them in the NFL. Like, they got Kelvin Banks type recruits at the end of the Mac Brown era, in the Charlie Strong era, in the Tom Herman era. They got those guys. What they didn't do was turn them into first rounders. And that's what happened to Kelvin Banks. And that's what's going to happen to Colin Simmons. And that's what's going to happen to these other players that are coming through now. And so that's the key difference to me between Sark and the previous era.
So to put a bow on it, what problem would you rather have? Not being able to score in the red zone, or going 20 years without having an offensive player drafted in the first round of the NFL draft?
Yeah, so they have fixed the major issues. They are now fine-tuning. This is like you've fixed your structural issues at your house. Now you're worried about the shutters. And that's a much better place to be.
Yeah, the leak in your roof is gone. And now you can put a nice island countertop on there.
Yeah. So will they get better in the red zone?
Win the national title this year, if I'm being honest. So, like, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. Probably in May and June.
Yeah.
They have every piece of equipment that they need to create a beautiful national championship winning home.
Yeah. Will they get better in the red zone? We will see. I was curious about this because I dug into the stats a little deeper because it was, remember, they changed kickers because Bert Auburn hit the transfer portal after spring practice. So I was like, okay, maybe it was maybe it was a kicking thing. But Bert Auburn was he was 10 of 11 from inside 39 yards. And so 37 is the limit for the red zone, like, because you add 17, 7 for the snap distance and 10 for the end zone. So, like, he was actually fine in kicks they did from the red zone. His issues were from distance. But they're going for it, which, look, when you have a defense as good as theirs, going for it in the red zone is not a terrible strategy on fourth down because you pin your opponent deep and you have a great defense, which puts you back in the red zone pretty quickly usually. So all they've got to do is punch a few more in. And that's the thing, Steve, in San Antonio. I think you were looking for us to say, oh, this is definitive proof that Steve Sarkisian's never going to get it done. I actually look at it the opposite way. It basically means he's got one more thing to tweak before they become a killing machine.
Right. And that could be as soon as this year. So I think that A+. Also, too, lastly, remember when he got hired? What everybody said?
Yeah.
Not so nice
thing. No, listen. And I think, look, Sark's stuff is very public, so we can talk about it.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me evaluating Steve Sarkisian as a head coach because I think his Washington and USC tenures, you have to look at it through the lens of, okay, how much did the drinking affect that?
Sure.
And now, obviously, it's a different situation. So clearly, he is a better coach than he was in those situations. And now you see progress year over year. And I'm looking at the Texas thing as a completely different coach than the guy who coached Washington and USC.
Absolutely.
Because of all that stuff.
Yep. I'm 100% with you. I think he gets an A+.
Yeah, he's done a good job. Now, look, we're going to grade hard. Like, we freaking killed Kirby Smart. 2018, 2019, like, killed him. We're like, Kirby's never going to get it. He's just never going to get there. He's got to figure out the offense. Well, guess what? They figured it out and they won 2 national titles.
As a benchmark, though, how long does a coach have to knock on the door and not get through before you start thinking that?
Oh, it's got to be a while. Like, because I go back to when I was young, and like Tom Osborne had that reputation of couldn't break through, and Bobby Bowden had that reputation of couldn't break through. And then they did. And it was like, oh, yeah, these guys were awesome the whole time. Like,
honestly, when you think about all the things that have to go right to win a national championship, statistically speaking, you should probably only win 1 out of every 10 years. So if it takes you 8 times to try it and you go on the 9th or 10th, that's probably right in line with what's normal. Like, in order for everything to break your way to actually go. And like the funniest thing about certain coaches, like even Ryan Day just broke through, but if the rules didn't change, he still wouldn't have been broken through. And people would think he's the worst coach in the world if they didn't get the exploded playoff opportunity. But
right. 14 playoff, different.
He's being fired right now.
Totally different conversation about Ryan Day. Exactly.
Yeah. So like, I just, my advice to Texas fans would be this. I know you tasted a national championship in 2006. I know you expect to win national championships, but this has been a hell of a ride and you should be enjoying it right now. And I think that the most part, they probably are. I think that it's easy to recognize when you see Texas as the number 1 team in the country coming into the year. 2 years ago, if you put Texas in the top 10, you were a laughingstock. I mean, I put Texas in the top 5 2 years ago, and all I heard was, oh, Texas is perpetually overrated. The Sarks never won 10 games. Texas chokes every year. They lose games they shouldn't. It's like they've gotten, like, honestly, too, like, think about it. Texas under Sark and Texas over the entire Charlie Strong and Tom Herman eras would lose to bad Big 12 teams all the time. You want to talk about fixing a problem? They don't lose to teams that they shouldn't lose to anymore. You know how big of a fix that is? Like, I mean, it's just like they've done.
Would you say the last time that happened was the Oklahoma game in 2023? And that was a pretty good Oklahoma team, won 10 games.
I think that they played in a few games in the Big 12 2 years ago that they almost lost, that it could have occurred, but they won.
Yeah.
But almost losing is so much better than losing.
Right. The Malik Murphy Kansas State game.
Even then, their quarterback was injured.
Yeah,
so
they won.
I don't think we have been positive, could be any more positive about it. And I think that if you're a Texas fan who's frustrated about your team's red zone appearances, you should be, because fans are allowed to be upset about the things that upset them. And you're supposed to react and critique and criticize things that aren't up to snuff. That's your prerogative. And I think you should. But I hope that as you type that question, you take a step back, look around, and just realize that this isn't Texas of 2019 anymore. And that's a huge step in the right direction. And now they're in the knocking on the door phase. And when you're on the knocking on the door phase, that means there's a title around the corner. So just be patient.
Is back, folks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe Tess. Thanks for the drop in.
Back, folks.
Next up, this question is from Chris. The top of the Big Ten and the top of the SEC are stacked. Are there any second-tier Big Ten or SEC teams you could see making a run next season? For the purpose of the question, I would consider Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Michigan, and maybe Indiana top-tier Big Ten teams. Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, LSU, and the SEC. So yeah, I've got a few. Okay, well, Chris said maybe Indiana. I've said this a few times in the last few weeks. I think ever since we had Clark Brooks on and talked about the top 100 impact players, and I realized that Indiana brings back just as many as Alabama and Oregon this year. And then we just had that discussion about Indiana in the red zone last year. Like, I'm fully back on board the Indiana hype train. And so, like, Indiana and Illinois, I think both of those teams in the Big Ten have a chance to be in the playoff hunt, and they play each other early in the season, and whoever wins that game, I think, is going to be in the mix.
Yeah. Okay. Teams that make a run, does that mean make a run in the national title race, or does that mean make a run in, like, being really good?
Contend for the playoff, potentially make the playoff.
Auburn comes to mind for me.
Auburn and Florida in the SEC for me.
Florida come to mind.
Yeah.
Toss the Big Ten graphic back up.
I got one more in the Big Ten.
Well, Illinois wasn't mentioned, was it? And
I just mentioned Illinois, but yeah,
in his question, and I'm trying to think.
He mentioned Michigan, which I think if Michigan's offense is functional, there's a really good chance. But the other one I have in the Big Ten is Iowa.
But
Mark Gronowski, we don't know because he was hurt in the spring and he's coming off an injury. But if he looks like he looked at South Dakota State, we're talking about the most competent quarterback play Iowa's had since C.J. Beathard.
Yeah.
And look, they got to play Iowa State in the non-conference. That's not going to be easy. But I don't know, River, if we have their schedule, if we can throw it up there, I think it's manageable if things break their way, that they could be potentially a playoff team. Look, they play Indiana, but they get them at home. They have Penn State and Oregon. But you could lose to Penn State and Oregon if you win the rest of them. And Iowa's not going to – Iowa might be favored in all the rest of them, depending on how things break.
Well, there's two others that come to mind, and I like this one because we're talking about playoff contention. Nebraska, their schedule is a team that I think could pop. Washington is a team that no one's talking about, but has a very exciting young quarterback.
God, Damon Williams is going to be fun.
He's a very good coach. He didn't forget how to coach. Yep. Okay, like I know they had a bad year last year, but he had a pretty good turnaround at Arizona in year 2. They're kind of lurking in the shadows. And if you're like looking at teams that could conceivably make the playoff, the one thing that stinks about Washington is that they have to play Oregon, Ohio State, and Michigan, and playing 3 of the 4
and Illinois.
It's pretty tough. And then lastly, here's a absolute curveball that will preview a show that we're going to have for you next week. And it's going to make waves. What if Oklahoma makes the playoff at 9-3 next year?
Oh my goodness, Ari.
9-3, hardest schedule in the country.
Shown the Oklahoma schedule graphic. We've shown the Oklahoma schedule graphic enough times on this show. Yeah,
9-3.
If you go 9-3 against that schedule, there's a really good chance you've beaten 2 playoff teams still.
Oklahoma. I don't know what team that opener is. Sorry. Is that Southern Illinois?
That is Illinois State.
Illinois State. Okay. Got it. I need to work on my logos. They beat Michigan week 2 at home. They go on the road, beat Temple, and then they beat a pretty good Auburn team. They beat Kent State, and they start off 5-0, which I don't think is insane to think. They play a good game but lose to Texas, beat South Carolina and Ole Miss, then lose to Tennessee and Alabama, or Alabama and LSU, and win one of those other games. They either beat Tennessee and lose to LSU, or lose to Tennessee.
And you're ignoring that Missouri's going to be pretty good this year again, probably. Like, Missouri's just been good the last few years under Eli Drinkwitz. So, yeah. And Missouri has the easiest SEC schedule draw. So it's
Oklahoma has enough equity in their hard schedule, in my opinion. If they are 9-3 at the end of the year, I'll put my my stake in the ground and say they will be in the playoff. Like, there's no way they won't be with that schedule.
It's going to depend on the 3 and what they look like. Like, did you get just demolished in those 3? But even if you did, to your point, Ari, they're gonna have wins against teams that probably are going to be either in the playoff or in the playoff
against that schedule. That to me is an implication that they will be competitive against anyone.
Yeah, it's the same. This is the same argument with Florida. We had it last year, even though they weren't. We knew very early they weren't going to get to that point. But it's the same thing this year with Florida. And yeah, I do think there will be arguments to be made at that point because, as you always talk about, the quality wins will be there.
One of these years, Texas A&M is going to be awesome, and we're not going to see it coming, too.
Well,
and I don't know when it's going to happen, but
that's Texas A&M. Texas A&M's a good one for this too, because like I was in Destin last week, and Mike Elko said we're better everywhere. Okay, they went 8-4 last year. If they go 9-3 against this schedule,
they could be in. Man,
or they're going to get some people fired if they go 9-3 against the schedule. That's for sure. But yes, they would be.
I don't know that they
very
would
much
be
contending, like going into the Texas game as a legitimate playoff contender,
which they were a year ago.
right?
Yeah, if they lost 3 games, let's just say they lose to Notre Dame, LSU, and Texas, do they have enough equity with the rest of their schedule to get in? I don't think it's as certain as it is with Oklahoma. It's
it would
possible,
depend
not
on
certain.
how good Auburn, Florida, and South Carolina and Missouri were in that circumstance.
Yeah.
So that's the thing is so much is dependent on how all of these deals shake out, because that could be an impossibly hard schedule if those teams I just mentioned turn out really good, or some of those teams kind of flop and it's like, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
So I also think Arkansas is not going to be terrible either. Like we just keep assuming they're going to be bad, but I don't think they're going to be bad. I think they're going to be a tough out. Like they beat Tennessee last year and Tennessee made the playoff.
Yep. We didn't even say Tennessee, who has Joey Aguilar magic. Joey Aguilar magic. Who knows? I'm just throwing. I just want River to continue to work with us, and I don't want. I just why I gotta throw my odes.
You're trying to stay on ball Twitter's good side. I know how it is. I know how you operate. Our next question comes from Crawford, and it taps into what we talked about on Thursday's show. Dear Andy, which football rivalries would you bring back every year, like Georgia Auburn, and which one would you create? Georgia Clemson should be every year. Bonus points, which games you would protect at all costs. So this actually taps into a few things we've been talking about. We talked about the USC Notre Dame rivalry on Thursday. Last week, Greg Sankey revealed that they have eight game SEC schedule models that would protect games like Texas A&M, and Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia Auburn, which I think if you're going to stay at 8, you've got to figure that out. Games that should come back. Georgia Auburn and Florida Auburn are two that I think the Auburn fans miss a lot. And I know the Florida fans miss that Auburn rivalry. That was a fun one. And that was an every year thing until the divisions, because Auburn and LSU were originally Florida's 2 permanent West rivals. And then when they went to 1 permanent West rival, that was the end of the Auburn one.
So other ones that you would want to protect or bring back?
Kansas, Missouri for sure I'd want to bring back. And I think either Oklahoma, Nebraska, or Colorado, Nebraska.
Yeah, Colorado, Nebraska is the one that I would like. Here's the thing, too. It's like you want to do the framework of big games that used to be super significant, but also, too, it's an added bonus if they're not in the same conference. Yeah. In most of these cases, that's the case. But like Michigan, Notre Dame is good, but like Colorado, Nebraska, or Nebraska, Oklahoma would both be good because they're in separate conferences. But I don't know, as much cross-pollination as possible, I guess. The other one that is listed here that I looked up was Ole Miss, Memphis. Do you have any recollection of this?
I mean, they're very close together, and they have played a lot over the years. I think they're playing again pretty soon here. Are they playing this season? Do they play this season?
I don't know if they play this season.
Yeah, they are not
Pitt,
playing
Penn
Memphis
State
this season. They got Tulane this season. But
Pitt, Penn State has happened, but I think they should play that game every year. And
that would be a fun annual game. Because for people, I actually, the Big Four, back when these teams were independent, they kind of had an agreement amongst each other to kind of sign players the same way and schedule the same way. So it was Syracuse, Pittsburgh, Penn State, West Virginia. They were the Big Four. I kind of like to see like a round robin of that.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
So
trying to think about.
Let's see what else would be good to bring back. Texas Tech, Texas. They should play every year. Like that should be.
Well, TCU.
If the SEC mandated you had to have a non-conference rival to balance out the Georgia Tech and South Carolina Clemson and all that. Like if the SEC mandated you had to have an out-of-conference rival, like wouldn't Texas Tech, Texas be the perfect rivalry.
Or TCU, because TCU Texas had TCU had their number for a while there in the last 10
Yeah,
years.
nice Southwest Conference Big 12 throwback. Yeah.
It would be cool, like if A&M had to play in-state schools playing each other from separate conferences that don't typically.
South
play each
Carolina, North Carolina to decide which is the superior Carolina.
other. Yeah. Houston A&M would be cool.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
Now we're just making
That would
stuff
be
up,
great.
but that would be cool.
Houston A&M or Houston LSU, either one.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of fun things you could do.
Stanford, UCLA, bring it back.
Yeah, I guess now. Right. Cal UCLA, like the two great academic state schools that now don't play anymore because they're not in the same conference. That would be a good one.
Anything that we could do to preserve the Pac-12 spirit, I'm in favor of.
Yeah. Like I'm very glad that Oregon and Oregon State and Washington State figured their stuff out and made sure they kept playing. And it's funny because the rest of the Big Ten can't even fathom how that works. Wait, you just schedule them every year? Like, how do you do that?
What is this?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think. Well, I guess USC does that with Notre Dame, but they're trying to not do it. So
yeah, I don't even want to think about that anymore.
I know it got frustrating talking about it, and then looking in the chat and seeing people just being willfully ignorant about it.
Yeah, it's insanity.
Like, just because it's your favorite school, like, pretend it's not USC doing this. Pretend it was South Carolina trying to get out of the Clemson rivalry. So pretend it's another USC doing it. How would you feel about it? You'd think it was stupid. So I agree.
Yeah, another instance of not being able to see reality because you're blinded by your own personal interests.
Yeah. Yeah, just because your favorite team says this is what they want to do doesn't mean you should have to like it.
Or you have to agree with it even. I feel like people feel like they have to agree.
Yeah. No, like you can be like, this is dumb. And there are, to be fair, there are USC fans and I guess major donors who are saying, this needs to happen. We need to keep playing this game. So,
yep.
Next question from Caden. I like Josh Pate's playoff format where the 2 and 3 seed in the conference play for the second auto bid and the first place team in the regular season is automatically in. What would you guys' ideal playoff format look like? Well, I think that's maybe a little bit cribbed from Tony Petitti's play-in game idea, which we had Joel Klatt on the show earlier this year, and he broke that all down, which it was definitely a product of Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti's brain, this sort of idea, these play-in games. My thing about the play-in games, while I do think they would be a whole lot of fun, like if the SEC did 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5 or whatever it is, if they had auto bids, it's just too hard to explain. And you can have fun games in other ways. Like there are other ways to make fun games. So I don't want them to do that because it's too confusing to explain to people when you're trying to grow the sport. And there's just an easier, more common sense way to do it. Like we talked about this last week when we talked about Lane Kiffin saying, why not just do best 16? Like if you're going to do a 16-team tournament, don't do the stupid double buys. Do a basic 16-team bracket. 1 plays 16, 2 plays 15, 3 plays 14. Your reward for having the best record or being the highest seed is you get to play the lowest seed. Like that's your reward. Enough of this other crap. And then that way, the conference championship games mean something more because you're trying to win the conference championship, 1, which matters, and 2, you're trying to get the higher seed, which allows you to play the lower seed. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that.
So he asked what your ideal one is. What's your ideal playoff? Because I know what mine is.
If it has to be 16, that's it.
Oh, it has to be 16? Then that's fine.
It doesn't have to be. So you can make it whatever you want.
Yeah, my ideal playoff would be 8. Automatic entry for the conference championship games, winners, conference champions. Mm-hmm. and then an at-large of 4 that mirrored the 14 playoff. So
you're just leaving out the group of 5. You're just ignoring them.
Group of 5 would be in the at-large conversation.
Okay.
Which would be far more easy to get into than when it was only 4. If you had the 4 conference champ and then you had 4 leftovers.
Right.
Now, the only thing that gives me pause, though, is that the conferences don't make sense, which makes, maybe that's perfect 5 years ago. And now that the conferences don't make sense, it's impossible. But for me, I feel like if we could get to a place where we had good regular season games still mattered. You rewarded the conference champions with an automatic. So you made the race, mean something. And then that had a committee to debate which 4 would get in that didn't automatically qualify. So you could preserve that aspect of it, which is who's in and who's out, which I think is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why anybody would ever want to change that. That's the best thing in the world. You would play your way in. If you're in a power conference, you control your own destiny no matter what. No one can tell you any otherwise. Then if you have a good draw and your schedule's easier, as long as you win your conference, you can do it. And then you have the 4 best teams that people feel like were non-conference champs that they could vote in, which I think would be great. And it would also minimize the field. And in a given year, 8 would be enough teams probably to figure out one of those 8 would probably win the national title in most years anyway. And then that would give the group of 5 an extra way to get in as well without guaranteeing it. Because I personally feel like the group of 5 has great teams, but I also feel like Boise might have gotten in one of the at-large spots last year.
They would have. Well, not
it
8.
would have been a debate.
I think they were the number 9 team in the rankings. So.
But at the same time, if they didn't, we knew what happened. We know what's going on. You don't have to pretend you know how I am. I annoy people, but we didn't need the extra context in the first round this year to figure out who was better than the others. It's. I would go the opposite way.
Since I'm taking out the possibility of play-in games, I think I'm fine with mine being 16. Because if you actually look at what the matchups would have been in a just straight-on 16-team playoff last year, there were some bangers in the first round.
Yeah, and you would have gotten some good bangers in the first round, but what you also would have done is gotten to the same point that you would have automatically gotten. So
that's fine. But then I got to see those games because now I think there are other years where it would not work out this way. But Georgia, South Carolina was a game we did not get in the SEC season. And I feel Ole Miss, Texas was a game we didn't get in the SEC season. They would have been good games.
I am as entertained by college football playoff discourse on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday as I am sometimes of the games actually being played. And I think that might just be a personal preference, so I don't want to convince you guys of that. If you don't like it, that's your prerogative. But I enjoy the who's in and who's out discussion. I enjoy comparing resumes. I enjoy that aspect of it. So I feel like the further down the line. So
you want a tighter field to get a more stakes on that discussion.
Tighter field to maintain regular season integrity and to demand excellence while also creating
I think 16 of 136, because that's still the most exclusive postseason in major American sports, is fine.
I know, but of the 16 of the 130 or whatever it is, you're cut off the bottom 70. They're not even in the discussion. So it's still not that number is used all
still
the time,
more exclusive.
True.
Ari,
okay, I know,
if you
but
cut off the bottom 70, you have 66 teams. 16 of 66
in the
still is the most
Major
exclusive.
League Baseball and make that the total teams. There are how many professional teams? They all have 3 AAA, AA, and single A. Let's add those in too. And is it the same?
But it's not. They're not eligible for the championship.
Yeah, but I think that's a deceiving and bad faith argument.
It's not. It's just math. It's the most exclusive. Even if you dropped it to just the power conferences, it's still the most exclusive.
Yeah. Hey, I'm just telling you what I like. They asked me what I would prefer. That's what I would prefer. So, I think that
I'm telling you what I like.
And I think you would actually
yours is less fun than mine.
You would go back in time and remember that the regular season game was just the playoff from start to finish, because all those games mattered during that time.
And they still matter.
To a much less degree, but yes.
Yes. But they don't have to matter as much to matter. As long as they matter, it's fun to watch. So If you get too big in the playoff, yes, you do make it where they don't matter at all, and then that's no fun.
But here's the thing, though, and I figured this out when I was doing my exercise of the college football bracket, and I'm sure you figured it out too doing yours. There are so many freaking rematches in this thing. And when you have the rematches, what?
I don't mind rematches.
I know, but what I'm saying, though, is if you just treat the initial matchup as the playoff game, you get the game still. Like, everybody always says, like, extra games.
Okay,
but it is. But
here's my question. Let's say you go to a restaurant and you have an incredible dish. And then the owner of the restaurant comes out and says,
"You want another one?"
I'm sorry, the rules say you can't have this again for another year.
That's what it sounds like in my household, actually.
Oh, is that your wife? Is what she says?
Crust. Yeah.
Then I may have given you a bad example then. But no, I would like to be able to have that dish twice a year if it was that excellent the first time.
What if the dish was $15 and every single time you eat it, you like something bad happen or like something changes in your life that you don't like?
It's just like the monkeys.
No, I'm just trying to think like you can
every time you eat it, somebody dies.
I'm trying to think like if what could get systematically worse as a result of eating it a lot.
Well, it becomes less special. So if you eat it every night, it's not special. If you eat it every week, it's not special. If you eat it once a month, it's probably not special. If you eat it twice a year, it's probably still special. 3 times a year, less special.
I'm not saying the games aren't fun. I'm just saying we get the games and by and large, and I think like the exclusivity of the playoff and how many times these teams play and extra games is all a fugazi. It's all like they're packaging it up and lying to you about what you're getting, and you're not actually getting.
They're not lying. They're telling you. You just have to choose. Like if you like the old stupid way they determine a national champion, that's your prerogative.
I've been called an Ohio State homer since I became national for 5 straight years. Can I tell you a little deep secret?
Yeah.
I resent that Ohio State won the national championship last year.
Whisper that louder. I don't think the people heard you.
I resent that Ohio State won the national championship last year because I feel like they earned it, obviously, and they should celebrate it, and they won within the confine of the rules. But a true diehard Ohio State fan knows you lost to the team that mattered. And like
no, a true Michigan fan knows that.
And they
Ohio State fan doesn't give a crap. They're just like, woo, national title.
No, I know. And of course they should. I'm just saying like that.
And look, I was on a team that played a rematch to win a national championship. And the Florida State fans were all like, yeah, but you lost in Tallahassee. And I'm like, yeah. And maybe don't lose by 32 in the rematch and you don't have to cry about it.
Yeah. No, and it's not even like an Ohio State attack. It's just like in general, like you had certain viewpoints of what you had to do to be a national champion in the past, and those don't exist anymore. And pretending like there's no cost to this is just insane to me. That's all.
There's a cost.
You're never going to change my mind about that.
But you don't actually take anything out of your wallet.
Yeah, like losing to Michigan, woo! Like that sucks to me. Like that's, what you just said.
Listen, we'll always have that video we did on the side of the road in college.
I know. But Ohio State fans shouldn't be celebrating and going whoop the year they lost to Michigan any more than they would want Michigan to be able to celebrate after they beat them. Like it's like that's the
but it can happen for Michigan the same way.
I think the reason why the rivalry is what it is because it crushed you. Like that's why people care so much.
Or because the states are right next to each other and in the same conference and they hate each other.
Do you think that like if in 1960 or like during the 10-year war, if like losing the game didn't stop you from winning a national championship, that the rivalry would be nearly as bitter as it is now? I think that like part of it is bitter. The stakes and the heartbreak and the trauma that you have to live through in order to survive that rivalry. That's what makes it the rivalry.
Our chat, like if we were to look to our right on our screens and look at the chat, there are Ohio State fans and Michigan fans yelling at each other still, and the Michigan fans are reminding the Ohio State fans who won and that they lost.
You know what's
and
happening
that they didn't win a true national championship. So
Michigan fans are saying to Ohio State fans, we beat you, go celebrate your national championship, but we won while dead inside. And Ohio State fans are saying back to Michigan fans, who cares? We won the Natty while dead inside.
No, Ohio State fans are saying Connor Stallions, Connor Stallions, Connor Stallions.
No, I'm
That's
just
what
saying,
they're
like, everybody is saying stuff to enrage their opponent, while also, if they looked into the depth of their soul and acknowledged what happened, are both upset about it.
But you're saying it cost something in the rivalry, and I'm telling you right now, as we sit here on June 6th, and people are currently arguing about Ohio State versus Michigan, that they are disproving your theory.
I don't know, man. I know. This is we're talking my personal preference here. You don't have to agree with me. My personal preference is that that war is D-Day. That's a war day. And if you don't win, you die. Like that's it. And that's the way I like it. And you don't have to agree again, but that's my preference in college football. Like, it is bizarre to me that
suppose nobody's going to show up for that game this year.
Ohio State's doing the Oprah Winfrey talk show tour right now because they won the national title while also not having solved the biggest issue their program was facing, which is beating their rival. It's crazy to me. Because that is what you want. And do you at least acknowledge it's kind of weird?
I think it's funny. It doesn't bother me the way it bothers you. I just think it's hilarious that because these people will never stop arguing about this game. No matter what you do, they'll never stop.
But you know that, deep in the soul of a Michigan fan, they are hurt that Ohio State was still able to win the national title. And you know deep in the soul of an Ohio State fan that they are still disgusted they didn't.
I think if Michigan hadn't won the national title the year before, I would agree with you on that. But I think the Michigan fans, because they did beat Ohio State and win the national title the year before, and then beat them again with what was not a very good Michigan team, I think they're fine about it. I don't think it hurts their soul one bit that Ohio State won the national title.
I think it hurts their soul deeply.
No,
because every year, as you know, in
us.
college football, what happened last year is the only thing that's happened. And Michigan got the ultimate taste of victory in one of the most thrilling and unbelievable upsets in the history of the rivalry. And it did nothing to stop the team that they beat from winning the national title. That sucks.
I mean, there was a solid month of would Ryan Day get fired over this? So
I know.
I don't think
Ryan Day
it gave us a hell of a lot to talk about. So
Hannibal Lecter walking into the crowd at the end of Silence of the Lambs, though. I mean, it's okay. He's fine.
I'm meeting a friend for dinner.
And that's the thing, too. And it's you don't me saying what I'm saying isn't a Ryan Day shouldn't be celebrating and Ohio State shouldn't be. Of course you should. You won the national title. You were the best team in college football last year without question. But my preference, and then we'll move on, is that when you lose the games you can't lose, then that stops you from doing that. That's all.
The games you can't lose are the playoff games because then you're done.
Right. So don't say that and then act like the regular season hasn't been damaged. And that we agree. Okay, go ahead.
From AZ Panther. As I'm here in Mexico sipping margaritas on vacation and listening to the podcast in a swim up pool, which, by the way, sounds like the very best way to consume our content.
Seriously.
I was wondering, do you think the committee will ever punish a Big Ten or SEC school for playing a truly horrible non-conference schedule? Okay. I think they were about to do that. If Indiana had slipped up, you absolutely would have seen them get punished. That a 10-2 Indiana was going to finish behind a 3-loss Alabama. Would have happened.
Andy, I don't think the college football playoff committee draws a line in the sand when they're in there that says, is this game a conference game or is it not? I think what they do is they look at the grand total of what you play.
Did you play good games or not? Yeah.
Because if you play a bad non-conference schedule, but then you play 9 really hard
great conference games. Yeah.
And what you played in the non-conference is of no consequence. And if you play an easy schedule in the conference, but you beat somebody big in the non-con, then you are forgiven for that. What I think that
this is what I was getting into with the Texas Tech discussion yesterday. If you're worried that if you're Joey McGuire and you're worried that the Big 12 is considered inferior to the Big 10 and the SEC, well, you have 3 opportunities to change that perception by trying to play those teams. So it all balances out. But you're right. Like if you get an incredibly hard draw in the Big Ten of the SEC, it really doesn't matter who you play in the non-conference.
Nobody's ever going to be punished specifically for not playing a hard enough non-conference schedule, but people will be left out because their strength of schedule numbers were bad. They had fewer opportunities to acquire quality wins, and thus their resume will be weaker at the end of the year. So it all plays hand in hand.
Right.
Like, I don't know, if you play in the SEC, and this is what people don't want to hear, but I think if you play in the SEC or the Big Ten, you can schedule anybody you want in the non-con and be fine because you play enough hard games in the regular season in order to do that. But
though Indiana was not going to be judged because of its schedule, like if you add Louisville and Indiana beats them, then I think that 10-2 Indiana has a better chance of making the playoff. 10-2 Indiana with that schedule would not have made the playoff.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lack of appreciation for what Indiana did, even though they didn't play anybody that great in the non-conference. I think going 11-1 was shied away as they haven't played anybody. Where going 11-1 against anybody is a really hard accomplishment.
They went 11-1 and beat the crap out of most of the teams.
Indiana,
yeah,
Indiana got in not because they were gifted a spot, but they took it the hard way, despite the fact they didn't play anybody all that tough. And also too, we were talking about this before the show started. Indiana absolutely beat the brakes off of Nebraska last year. Indiana beat a Michigan team that wound up beating Ohio State and Alabama in the bowl. They beat Washington. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like their resume was great. It wasn't. But they unequivocally proved that they should have been one of the 12. If they wouldn't have gotten in the 4.
Right. And the thing is, whereas Tennessee was a lock to get in at 10-2, I don't think Indiana would have made it at 10-2. So there is what we're talking about. And you and I have said this a million times, and I still don't think people quite grasp it. Like, they do consider this stuff. You don't like that Indiana got in, but it wasn't apples to apples because Indiana went 11-1. If Indiana's 10-2, they're out with that schedule. But they went 11-1.
The thing that's different about non-conference and conference is you can actually control that. In conference, you get split your schedule. Indiana didn't choose its conference schedule last year. If Indiana would have played Oregon last year and lost, then they would have gotten in because they would have been 0-2 against really good teams, and they would have had nothing to bolster it. And they controlled not playing a really tough non-conference schedule, and that would have came back to bite them. So I think that this already exists. And I think that people are becoming confused with nonsensical talking points that are being spewed in the form of commissioners saying things just to get through their side of the bidding war.
Yeah, I'll be glad when they finally get that thing determined. And they have one more in-person meeting before the season starts, and that is June 18th, I believe. And then, according to Greg Sankey, they have until the end of November / December 1st to finalize that. I hope they don't take that long. For God's sake, please get this thing done.
Yeah.
Because I'm done with the rhetoric. Like, just pick something and do it. And we'll argue about it later, but pick something.
Yeah.
You have to pick something. Like, that playoff starts in 18 months. Playoffs? Starts in 18 months. Pick something. All right. One more question. It's good as we start the summer here. This is from John. What are the top 3 books about college football that you would recommend to someone who knows nothing about college football? Oh, and there's a great one that River has put up there, Swing Your Sword, Mike Leach's book that he did with our friend Bruce Feldman. I actually have a different Bruce Feldman book on my top 3. So you absolutely have to read Meat Market by Bruce Feldman. It's a year inside Ole Miss recruiting when Ed Orgeron was the head coach at Ole Miss. I think it's the best college football book ever written. I think you will understand recruiting and college football better reading that book than anything else. That's one. The Opening Kickoff by Dave Revson is another. If you want to really, truly understand the history of the game, it's about how the game really came to be. and the very, very earliest years of college football. Just a great look at how the sport evolved. And then, the modern books are all like Scandal and the System, and then like it's all depressing.
I've got one.
All right, go for it.
I read this when I was on the Ohio State beat, but Wars, They Knew It. Woody Hayes, Bo Schembechler, and America in a Time of Unrest.
That's a great one.
And that to me, I think, kind of gives you the sense of why people are obsessed with college football, why that rivalry is special, and like times in America during that time and all. I think that like if you want to understand the spirit of college football, you'll get it reading that.
Another one, I think
a lot of that stuff applies to other rivalries too. It's not just that, but it's just like you want to understand the hatred and the passion that goes into college football. Go read a book about a rivalry.
Yep, that's a great one. The other one I was going to suggest is The Junction Boys, which is about Bear Bryant's first season at Texas A&M, and specifically about the preseason camp before the first season at Texas A&M. And you will understand more about Texas A&M. You'll understand more about Bear Bryant, and you will understand more about college football in general when you read that one. That is now different era stuff that you could never do now, but it's a hell of a read. Hell of a read. Yeah. So, well, we've given you some beach reading. Hopefully, we've given you some swim up bar listening, because Ari, the swim up bar is the way to go.
Do people listen to books on tape? I'm going to Vegas this weekend, and I'm going to have some alone time in the pool, I think. Do I just like take some headphones in there and like listen to like a murder podcast in the pool? Do people do that? The one that someone just told me to read, it has nothing to do with sports, is Operation Paperclip. I don't know if you've heard of this book.
I don't know that.
The secret intelligence program that brought Nazi scientists to America after World War II. And I helped them win the space race, which is insane. But like, I'm into that sort of thing now.
That's a good one. What's the one about the?
I make you uncomfortable, don't I?
Well, no, it's a good book. Like that sounds like a fascinating book. I'm trying to remember the one I recommended to you.
American Kingpin,
Silk Road
story.
Yeah,
it's called American Kingpin.
Yeah,
I was a great one. Book on tape. I was so enthralled by that book, I would arrive home while listening to it and then keep driving.
Yeah.
The what's the one about the dropout? I know that's the book. I think it's called The Dropout. It's about Elizabeth Holmes.
The woman that's in jail for doing Theranos. Yeah,
this is all I read that one. But that was a really good true crime book. And then, of course, my favorite book, which Mitch Light, my editor at the Athletic,
Bad Blood is the book on Theranos.
Oh, Bad Blood, right? The Dropout was the podcast. I also think the Under the Banner of Heaven, about the fundamentalist Mormons and the murder that happened, was pretty fascinating too. But I'm also all ears to great books on tape, because I as I get older, listen to music less while I'm driving and more to podcasts and audiobooks. So yes, but read those college football books. And I haven't read Meat Market, and I told this to Bruce, and like I just said, like, because it's not an audiobook, I was like, Bruce, will you just do a personal reading of Meat Market to me? Because he's got the most soothing and relaxing voice. And Bill Landis, both of them. Like Bruce Feldman's voice.
Now the question is, does he become? How's his Ed Orgeron impression?
You are stand-in, because you would read Ed Orgeron's quotes in his voice. That's what they would need to bring you in to do the impression.
Okay,
every time he's quoted.
Or
but
Chris
that's been on my
Vernon,
list, and I have it. I have Meat Market up there on my mantle, and I have not got, because somebody said it's outdated, and I don't think that's true. So I want to read it.
Definitely not outdated. No. Yeah. The other one I will recommend that is not about college football, but it will actually help you understand college football, because I think some of the leaders of college football have read it. And
soccer book.
Yep. It's called The Club: How the Premier League Became the Richest, Most Disruptive Business in Sport. It's by Jonathan Clegg and Joshua Robinson. It is awesome. And they actually have two other ones. They have a Messi versus Ronaldo book, which is very good, but their Formula One book, which is their newest one, is really good too. It's not as good as the Premier League one, but it's right up there.
Yeah, I need to read that too, even though I don't know the first thing about American soccer.
I don't know anything about soccer or Formula One, and I was completely enthralled.
I said American soccer. I don't know anything about soccer. I am very amused though that my wife went to Paris on a shopping trip, and the day she arrived, like PSG won the whole thing, and like there were like riots in the streets while she was there. I think that's quite funny.
Well, Champions. That's their first Champions League title. Big doings.
See, you know that. I didn't know that. That's great.
Well, I also might have asked for the PSG Jordan 1s for Father's Day. We'll see if that comes through. All right. Ari, it's been a pleasure. Next week, we are off, but we are not leaving you without shows. We would never do that to you. We are taking deep dives into some of the most intriguing teams in college football in 2025 with some help from our experts at our On3 team site. So the plan is to talk some Tennessee, some LSU, some Notre Dame, some Michigan, and some Oklahoma. We kick it off Monday with the Sooners with our guys George Soy and Eddie Radosevich from Sooner Scoop. It's going to be a lot of fun.
If something goes crazy, Andy, if something goes absolutely bananas, we'll be around.
We're terrible at being on vacation, so you may see us. We love you.